محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
عليه وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحه وأرواح العالمين بالتراب والتميم كذا. Respected Sheikh Muhammad, organizers, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. قال الله تعالى في محكم التنزيل: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وابتغوا إليه الوسيلة وجاهدوا في سبيله لعلكم تفلحون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآله محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Holy Quran, O you who have believed, fear Allah and seek the means of nearness to Him and strive in His cause that you may be successful. Humans by nature, because we are imperfect beings, naturally we seek perfection. We're attracted to perfection. Anything that is better than us, or if we lack a certain thing and we find it in something else, we seek nearness to this thing. Now because we as monotheists, as believers in a deity, believers in a God, we believe that Allah Azza wa Jalla is ultimate perfection, correct? Does anyone here have doubt in the perfection of Allah? Anyone found any imperfection in God? We'd have to talk later about it. You have problems, yeah? So because we have this belief in the perfection of Allah Azza wa Jalla, so we're constantly seeking a nearness to Him. Naturally, we are programmed to strive towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Naturally, we are programmed to seek His acceptance, to seek nearness to Him, to seek a connection with Him, a path towards Him. So we do it through many means. Every religion has its own way. Every religion has a certain set of prayers and rules and hymns and meditations on how to reach this perfect being, Allah Azza wa Jalla. Now we can never be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can be like Allah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands us, Abdikum mithli, or mathli. My servant, be like me. Allah Azza wa Jalla wants us to be like Him in all of His names, in all of His aspects. He wants us to be forgiving. He wants us to be honest. He wants us to be truthful. He wants us to be merciful. Allah Azza wa Jalla is the perfect ambition that every human being should be heading towards. Now because there's no time, so I'm not going to go into the different arguments of other religions and how they say they get to Allah Azza wa Jalla or what their path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So because I'm speaking in front of inshallah a Muslim crowd, and inshallah if there's any non-Muslims here, then they can understand my situation and the limitation in time. So we're going to talk within the circle of Islam. Within the circle of Islam, there are several theories on how one, or several methods on how one shall reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's through your fasting, through dua, what types of dua, are all types of dua permissible? Inshallah, today's topic is on a form of dua, which is tawassol. Now, a small disclaimer, tawassol is a controversial topic within Islam. So I urge those that are in here that do not adhere to a school of thought which does not accept tawassol, is not familiar with tawassol, to understand that inshallah nothing in here is an attack on any other ideology. It is just simply a means for me to bring across what the madhab of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam says about tawassol and our understanding of it and how we justify tawassol. If you're all on board, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Am I speaking too fast? I feel like I'm speaking fast. Okay. So we said there's several ways to Allah Azza wa Jalla. One of these ways is dua, and one of the forms of dua is tawassul. Tawassul, when you translate it into English, it means to seek a means. To seek a means onto something. Now, Islamically, our scholars tell us, and our hadith tell us, and logic tells you, everything you do, every action you do with the intention of seeking nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a form of tawassul. It's a form of seeking nearness. So when you pray, your prayer is a form of tawassul. Because the intention behind your prayer, or the goal and objective behind your prayer is not the prayer itself, it's Allah Azza wa Jalla. So through your prayers, you seek nearness to Allah. Am I making sense here? These actions of qiyam, takbir, ruku', sujood, in themselves mean nothing. If you did these actions in a universe where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had not made these a source of nearness to Him, they would mean absolutely nothing. It would be yoga, or just exercise, burning calories, that's all they would mean. But because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed the specification of nearness to Him inside this prayer, inside these actions, so these prayers are now a source or a way of nearness towards Allah. You're fasting. There is no merit in not eating all day, unless you want to talk scientifically, or I'm not a nutritionist, but I'm not fond of not eating all day. There is no merit in it. But this fasting in itself is a source of nearness to Allah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you and said to you that there is a certain month in the year where I command you to fast, and if you fast in this day of the year, then you will come to me. And if you do not fast in this day of the year, then you have disobeyed me and you are far away from me. So your fasting here is a nearness to Allah. The same with any other action. Charity, struggling in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking knowledge. These things in themselves have no merit. Unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed the merit within you. And you only do them to seek a nearness to Allah. It's like saying someone wakes up in the morning and they want to go to work, right? They wake up in the morning, they go to their car, they turn the car on and they drive to work. No sane person wakes up in the morning with the intention of just going to his car. Says, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m., I'm going to have a shower, get dressed, and then I get my car keys and I turn on my car and just sit in it. Or just drive around for no reason whatsoever. The target here is not the car itself. The car is a means to get him from point A to point B. Okay. So now we've established an idea of what Tawassol is. So we're going to come now and make it a bit more specific. Interceding with others in order to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the core of our topic today, inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The school of Ahlul Bayt, the school of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, is unique in this regard. When it comes to Tawassol of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, only in this era. Tawassol in the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So asking Allah Azza wa Jalla why the Prophet, asking Allah Azza wa Jalla why the Imams alayhi salam is not a new concept which was exclusive to the Shia. And if we had time, I would have gone into the historical background of when Tawassol became not so common amongst other schools of thought. Historically it was very common. We have evidence of this, but this isn't the time or place to go through it. But there are several arguments against Tawassol. Us being a monotheistic religion, there are several understandings of monotheism within Islam itself, but we agree on core values, we agree on core issues, correct? There isn't a Muslim in the world that tells you there is more than one God, or there is Allah and beside Him is an Imam or a Khalifa or. As Muslims, we're unique in this regard. All of us are monotheists and we have this firm belief in the Tawhid of Allah. So the argument comes. We as monotheists, we as muwahideen, as Muslims, we have a slogan that we go by. لا مؤثر في الوجود إلا الله. There is no causative in existence but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one causes anything but Allah. Nothing happens without Allah Azza wa Jalla's will. This is a belief us Muslims believe in, correct? Anyone here believe they can do anything without Allah's will? Believe you can defy Allah like the son of Nabi Nuh alayhi salam? Said, run up to the mountain. Allah can't get with you. You can't do anything. You can't blink or breathe. Your heart cannot beat without the will of God. So then the critics come and they say, Tawassol. When you come and you say, Ya Ali, when you say, Ya Zahra, Ya Ali ibn Musa, Salamullah, are you not placing them as causatives beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You're saying Allah is a causative and so are they. It's a good question, isn't it? It makes you think. Because if you do agree that besides Allah Azza wa Jalla, there is a separate causative, a separate being that decides and a separate being that can make things happen without Allah Azza wa Jalla, this is shirk. This is monotheism. And monotheism in its purest form. This is where we differ from Hindus and pagans and other mushrikeen. The answer that the Ahlul Bayt, by the way, I'm just going to give you at the platform. I'll bring the questions and then I'll bring the answers and we'll go back and forth, inshallah. Keep it clear. So is Tawassol contradictory to Tawhid? Are we saying, when I say, Ya Zahra, do this for me. Ya Zahra, give me a car. Ya Zahra, let me pass my exams. To the brothers, Ya Zahra, find me a wife. Am I asking Sayyidina Zahra alayhi salam, am I asking her with the belief that Sayyidina Zahra alayhi salam is an independent causality? Sayyidina Zahra alayhi salam is capable on her own of doing things, salamullahi alayhi? Is Imam Ali al-Rida alayhi salam capable of doing this? The school of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they say no, this is not what we do. We come and we tell you that there are two causatives in monotheism. In our belief, there are two causatives, but the causative is one, which is Allah Azza wa Jalla. Allah Azza wa Jalla is an independent cause. He's independent. Allah relies on nobody. If He wills, kun fayakun, it shall happen. But we say that there is bittaba, which means connected to Allah Azza wa Jalla, or dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is other causatives, but they mean nothing without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They mean absolutely nothing without Allah. I'll give you an example. This glass of water here, if I was thirsty now, okay, I have two choices. I can sit and say, Ya Allah, quench my thirst. Quench my thirst. And He's capable of quenching my thirst, correct? Anybody doubt that Allah Azza wa Jalla can quench your thirst? Like this, He'll quench it. However, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He tells me, from when I was a kid and from the beginning of time, He says, if you want to quench your thirst, drink water. I have placed the cure for your thirst in water. Go to the water and drink it. And when you drink this water, your thirst will be quenched. Do we come now and say that this is shirk because this water is independent of Allah Azza wa Jalla, and He quenched my thirst and Allah didn't, so this water is separate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's by itself. Am I a polytheist now? Or fire. Allah Azza wa Jalla placed a specification of burning within the fire. Correct? Created fire, fire burns. Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling me, if you want to burn something, use this fire. If I want to cook my food, I can say, Ya Allah, cook my food for me, make my milkhiyi for me, God. Do it. He can. And He can if you really wanted to. Yeah? However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, no, you want your food cooked. I created fire for you, and you go to the fire, light the fire, and the fire will cook your food. It will heat your food for you. And this fire will not burn without the will of Allah Azza wa Jalla. The specification of cutting in a knife, same example. The knife will cut. I can tell Allah to cut my apple for me. Without the will of Allah, they can do nothing. And we have examples in the Quran. For example, Nabi Ibrahim sallallahu alayhi, when he comes and he's commanded to slaughter his son, Ismail alayhi salam. The Quran and our riwayat say that the blade slid on the throat of Ismail alayhi salam, but did not cut him. It did not cut him. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla did not will for this blade to cut. This blade is not independent from Allah Azza wa Jalla. It cannot do things on its own. When Namrud throws Ibrahim alayhi salam into the fire, our riwayat say this fire burnt so ferociously and was so hot that birds flying overhead would drop and would die from the heat of this fire. Yet Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam is thrown into the fire and nothing happens to him. Why? Because Allah says, Ya nar, kuni bardan wa salam ala Ibrahim. So this fire, Allah commands the fire, oh fire, be cool and peaceful upon Abraham. This fire cannot burn without the will of Allah Azza wa Jalla. There was a beautiful story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and you might be familiar with it. It's narrated by the camp of Umar ibn Sa'd. So this is narrated by the enemies. They say one of the soldiers of Umar ibn Sa'd, he he hears Imam Hussein alayhi salam. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. He hears Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Ashura calling out, Wallahi inni atshan, by Allah I am thirsty. Wallahi inni atshan. This individual, when he hears Imam Hussein alayhi salam says, by Allah I am thirsty, he says to him, by Allah, you will not taste water until you taste slaughter. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when he sees how arrogant this person is, when he sees the evil in his eye, when he sees that this person has no hope of returning, Imam Hussein raises his hand to the skies and he says, oh Allah, let him die of thirst. The army of Umar ibn Sa'ad say, this individual on the day of Ashura would run back and forth to the Euphrates and drink and drink and drink and cry, Wallahi inni atshan, by Allah I am thirsty. Allah Azza wa Jal removed the cure for thirst from the water that this man was drinking. The reason I call upon the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam is because of their nearness to Allah Azza wa Jal. Were they not connected to Allah Azza wa Jal, they'll be just historical individuals. Like anyone else. Anyone here do Tawassol by Malcolm X? Or Nelson Mandela? Ya Allah bihaq Nelson Mandela. We don't. Because I don't find the connection here between great people. Yeah, good. They're very inspirational. But we don't do it. We don't do it. Because they're not connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam are only significant to me because Allah Azza wa Jal made them significant to Him. And me as a beloved of Allah Azza wa Jal, I love these beloved ones. Because I saw Allah Azza wa Jal love them, I love them. And they were the daughter of Allah Azza wa Jal. Imam al-Hujjah ta'ala he says in Quranic, and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they were the wasil that Allah Azza wa Jal refers to in the Quran. Anyone who still think that Tawassol is a form of shirk or that the Imams are independent to Allah Azza wa Jal, so we can move on to the next point. Sallallahu alaihi So now we come to the second argument. Is there a basis in the Quran? Because as Muslims, specifically as believers or as members of this school of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, yeah, we believe that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa left with us two weighty things. Kitabullah wa itrati ahli. Allah Azza wa Jal, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, I leave with you two weighty things, the book of Allah and my progeny. So we need to refer to them. We can't just go and bring things from ourselves, correct? We can't just go and say, Wallah, I feel like playing a game for Robbery every Thursday is mustahab. If there's no hadith, no basis, you can't do things like this, correct? So is there a basis for Tawassol in the Quran? Is there a basis for Tawassol in our Aql? Well, the first verse I read, Allah Azza wa Jal is saying in the first verse, I'll repeat it one more time. He says, O you who have believed, fear Allah and seek the means of nearness to Him, and seek the means of nearness to Him. Allah Azza wa Jal, He uses the word, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ittaqullah wabtaghu ilayhi al-wasila. Wasila, He uses the term wasila, telling you seek a means. They come and they say, yeah, but He's referring to jihad here because He says, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي سَبِيلِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. We say, yeah, jihad is also a wasila to Allah Azza wa Jal. Jihad in itself, as we explained, has no merits. We have several stories in the Quran. We have the story of Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam and his children. When the sons of Yaqub alayhi salam and the brothers of Yusuf salamullah alayhi, when they transgressed and they oppressed him and they threw him in the well, and they came and they wanted forgiveness from Allah Azza wa Jalla, they didn't go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They could have. They didn't. They went to Yaqub alayhi salam, who at that time was Hujjatullah Allah. He was a representative of Allah Azza wa Jalla on earth at that time. So they go to Yaqub alayhi salam and they ask him for forgiveness. This is in the Quran, not in Kafir or Bihar al-Anwar or some weird hidden Mus'haf Fatima that we have somewhere. Yeah? No, this is in the Quran of Allah Azza wa Jalla. We have a verse also in the Quran, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, is Allah Azza wa Jalla talking about the munafiqin, the hypocrites. وإذا قيل لهم تعالوا يستغفر لكم رسول الله لووا رؤوسهم ورأيتهم يصدون. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, and when it is said to them, come to the Apostle of Allah, the Apostle of Allah will ask forgiveness for you, they turn back their heads and you may see them turning away with pride. Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving a way out for the munafiqeen, yeah, because they're stuck now. Okay, they've stuffed up big time. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, I'm going to give you a way out, yeah? Go to the Messenger of Allah. Go to Rasulullah. Don't come to the mosque and pray to me. Go to Rasulullah and ask him to forgive you. Ask him for forgiveness. And Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, and those who refuse to go to you and won't go to you, you will see them walking away with pride and arrogance. They refuse to come to you out of arrogance and pride. So these are two examples from the Quran. In Sahih Bukhari we have a story, it's a famous story. It's also narrated in Sahih Muslim. Inshallah later on, anyone who wants, I can give the references to these, inshallah. There is a famous story that I'll mention two. The first one is after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. The first Khalifa, he stands over the body of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi and he complains to God. He says, Ya Allah, we had this Prophet of Allah as a means to you, to seek nearness to you. What do we do now? Which is evidence that the companions used to seek nearness to Allah through the Prophet. The second Khalifa, there was a time of drought, and for 40 days he commands the Muslims to pray Salat al-Istisqa, which is a prayer for rain. For 40 days they pray and nothing happens, there is no rain. In Sahih Muslim it narrates that he does Tawassol by Abbas alayhi salam, Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, simply because he's related to Rasulullah. Says to him, Ya Abbas, we've been doing this thing for 40 days and it's not working. Yeah? Narration in Sahih Bukhari says that Abbas took the cloak of Rasulullah, so he seek nearness to Allah in the cloak of the Prophet. He takes the cloak of Rasulullah, he puts it on, and he begins to pray and it rains. In another narration they say he goes to Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, tell everybody to remain in their homes. Imam Ali alayhi salam takes Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam and they pray and it starts to rain. The story of Yusuf alayhi salam again. Yaqub alayhi salam's blindness was cured by what? By the shirt of Yusuf, the cloth. Not just the cloth itself did it. Obviously, the cloth has no merit in it. But because Allah Azza wa Jalla willed. And when Allah wills a thing, it is to be. Who is to argue against Allah for this? Now I'm speaking because I'm speaking to a Muslim crowd. If we're speaking to a non-Muslim crowd, we'll go to a different angle, inshallah. So from Quran and Hadith we have this. From the Ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, inshallah we'll leave them towards the end. What the Ahlul Bayt, us as members of this school of thought, how we are commanded to do Tawassol. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just before we move on from the issue of Tawassol in the Quran, there is a very important, or one of the most important stories in the Quran regarding Tawassol. And it's the reason we're on earth today, according to some. When Nabi Adam alayhi salam is created, what does Allah Azza wa Jalla command? He commands the angels to what? To prostrate to Adam. إِذْ قُلْنَا الْمَلَائِكَةُ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا Iblis. Now this has many lessons in it. Iblis does not recognize the Imam of his time, which is the first thing, and this is why Allah Azza wa Jalla sent him down to earth, or this is why he earns Allah Azza wa Jalla's wrath. But also because Iblis here did not recognize the appointed means to Allah Azza wa Jalla, which was Adam. At the time, if you read the narration, it's not that Iblis hates Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not evident. We don't understand that Iblis has an enmity towards Allah. In fact, he offers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, no, I don't want to prostrate to him. Let me prostrate to you. A long prostration, nobody before me or after me will do such a prostration to you. No one will worship you the way I did. What's Allah Azza wa Jalla's response in the hadith? أعبد كما أريد أنا. If I command you to pray Maghrib 3 rak'at, you pray 3 rak'at, you don't say, Wallah, nah, 5 is good. It's deenak, or deen bay, it's not your religion. This is Allah's religion. Yeah? You can't just come and, no, this is better than Allah. So Iblis offered this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, I'll prostrate to you, just I don't want to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam. What's Imam Sadiq alayhi salam say about Iblis? He says, Iblis, if he were to cry the day and night, if he were to fast all the days, and stand up in prayer seeking forgiveness all the nights, Allah Azza wa Jal will not accept one deed from him unless he goes back and prostrates to Adam. There's a continuation to it. It says, وَكَذَلِكَ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ. And the same applies to this nation, the Muslims. We do not seek a means that Allah has appointed for us. If we refuse to come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the doors which He has opened for us, then what basis do we have in front of Allah? What argument do we have in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment when He says you did not come to me? Say I did, but I came this way. He says I didn't want you to come this way. I want you to come the other way. You do things the way I want to do. It's not your religion. It's not your call. So now the third argument will come and say, listen, good stuff, all these verses you brought, these ahadith you brought, fantastic, great story, but they're all regarding living people, you didn't get it. You're talking to dead people now. Prophet is dead, Imam Hussein is dead, Sayyidah Zahra is dead, everyone's dead. You're talking to the dead, it's weird, it's freaky, stop it. It's scary. That's what you're saying. So what's wrong with doing it? Say it's shirk to talk to the dead. It's shirk. You're a mushrik. You're talking to the dead, you're a mushrik. You're a polytheist. There's something wrong with you. Really? The definition of shirk here is to associate a partner with Allah or to claim that one is independent of Allah. This is shirk, polytheism. To say this Allah exists and this exists, separate. They have nothing to do with each other. This is shirk. Or to say that Allah creates, but X also creates, and B also creates, and C also creates, and they all create, and they all have the same power, and they can. This is shirk. So if I talk to the dead, how is this shirk? On what basis is this shirk? If you've agreed with everything else I've said, because I'm assuming now you've agreed with everything else I've said, and we've come to the talking to the dead part, which is scaring everyone. Everyone's afraid of it now. The argument is, talking to the dead is shirk. The response from the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam is, so if they were alive, if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa was alive, as proven in the Quran and Hadith, it would be in line with Tawhid to ask him, but because he is dead, you are now mushrik, correct? That's what he said. So is life and death, is life a condition for Tawheed and the death of the individual a condition for shirk? Is the fact that Rasulullah is dead now, does this make me a mushrik? Does this change my belief in Rasulullah? My belief in the Prophet of Allah Azza wa Jalla and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, while they're alive, is the same as while they're dead. I do not believe in a different Muhammad. If you were alive at the time of Imam Rida alayhi salam, he would be the same Ali ibn Musa Rida salamullah alayhi as he is today. He is still not independent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is still that link between me and Allah Azza wa Jalla. He is still incapable of anything without the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So where's the shirk here? Imam Rida alayhi salam didn't change. My belief in Imam Jawad alayhi salam didn't change. His status with Allah Azza wa Jalla didn't change. All that changed is his physical presence in this world is no longer here. And this is if we were to assume that he was dead. Because there is another argument. What do you mean they're dead? But we come to another argument. Allah is clear in the Quran. He's clear when he talks about martyrs, for example. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ هُمْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِندَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Do not consider those who have been killed in the way of Allah Azza wa Jalla as dead. Verily they are with Allah being provided for. What about Sayyid al-Shuhada? If we're talking about all Shuhada. If a normal shaheed is alive with Allah Azza wa Jal, the master of the shuhada is more worthy of this life. The imam of this shaheed is more worthy of this life. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who this shaheed was martyred for, is more worthy of this life. They are alive with Allah, as the Quran says, being provided for. Your argument here makes no sense. There is no basis for it. Sallallahu So we come to the next argument, which is why. Okay, I'm going to agree. Tawassol is good. You can do tawassol. It's in the Quran, you can prove it through the hadith. Imams are not dead, or they are dead, and even if they are dead, it doesn't change anything. Okay? So we come to the next argument. Why? Why can't I just ask Allah Azza wa Jalla? Doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the Quran that He's closer to me than my jugular vein? Do I need tawassul? The school of Ahlul Bayt alayhi say, yes, Allah Azza wa Jalla is closer to you. He is closer to you than your jugular vein. But your distance and your nearness to Allah Azza wa Jalla is relative. You fluctuate. You say how? You say it depends on several factors. Your nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala depends on time, space. It can depend on your status, your marital status. It can depend on who you are as an individual, on your faith. You say, I say, fine. Is dua. He says, and what if this isn't enough? He says, Allah Azza wa Jalla will squeeze him in his grave, but then he will come to us pure of sins and he will enter heaven, inshallah. But let's just mention a few ahadith by the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, so we can wrap this up, inshallah, just regarding tawassul. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alihi. We have narration in Al-Kafi regarding Imam Baqir, it's narrated in Al-Kafi that Imam Baqir, when he would get ill or in a stage of his life, he got really ill and he was having cold sweats and a lot of pain. Imam Sadiq he says he would scream out Ya Zahra throughout his illness, that people outside the door of the house would hear him. They would hear Imam Baqir screaming this. Imam Baqir here would intercede with Sayyidina Zahra because of Sayyidina Zahra's relationship with Allah.